Is hip hop dead? Why is the biggest genre struggling to make hit records? We're going to talk about it. I was scrolling through the Billboard Hot 100. This is the biggest songs in the world, and this is something I do on a weekly basis as somebody in the music industry. And it shocked me how few hip hop records are in the top 10 and how fewer records ever make it to the number one spot. What's going on? Hip hop turned 50 last year, and it just feels like the biggest genre in the world is not represented when it comes to hit records. We're going to get into some reasons why this is, from the artists and the music to the promotions or lack thereof, and also to shift focus on the gatekeepers as well as the fans and what role we're all playing in what I see to be the decline of hip hop hits. Last year, hip hop celebrated its 50th birthday. Hip Hop 50, happy birthday hip hop. But while this was going on, there were so many stories and headlines coming out how the biggest genre in the world was underperforming on the top charts. Back in 2018, hip hop took the crown as the number one genre, but fast forward just 5 years later, and we weren't seeing any top artists on the Hot 100 or the Billboard 200, which is the albums charts. Billboard ran this article. Hip-hop's number one shortage. Is it actually a crisis or is it all cyclical? Fast forward around September, we did start to see rappers getting to that top spot on the Hot 100, but it was more than half the year where we didn't see any of that. There were so many headlines and think pieces about hip-hop being dead, something happening to hip hop. How can you celebrate such a big milestone and be this global influencer of culture, but we're not seeing it in the metrics? The Hot 100 is a cross-genre chart, and it's made up of several factors. This is what Billboard says. There's actual sales, so both physical sales as well as digital sales, airplay, which is reflected in radio, as well as streaming. Billboard doesn't give us the percentage mix of how each of these things is broken down. In fact, I did a piece for XXL a while back about the methodology of the chart, and I interviewed someone from Billboard, and he basically said that it's like a black box. It's not something that we share with people within the industry or with artists. But these are the factors that you have to keep in mind when we're looking at a top hit on the Hot 100. And every week, the charts reflect numbers between Friday and Thursday. So that just reflects Friday release day going through Thursday of the next week. Okay, so now we know what the metrics we're playing with. What is the first reason why we're not seeing more hip hop hits? Let's get the biggest reason out there. The artists and the music are terrible. I know, that's really hard to say out loud, but let's just tackle the biggest elephant in the room. The music isn't good, and that's why no one's listening to the music. It seems pretty obvious, but let's take a deeper dive. And yes, I understand good and bad are subjective terms, but I think all of us can agree that the music that's come out in the last, let's say 5 to 7 years, I'm going to say is ultimately forgettable within the hip-hop canon, for the most part. Are people 25 years from now or 50 years from now going to be listening to a bunch of SoundCloud rappers or drill artists? I don't think so. I don't think that the music has elevated itself to become a part of the larger conversation and the larger history of hip-hop. And I'm not a musicologist, but I think there's an overall philosophy that's been driving hip-hop that has affected the music in a negative way. I'm going to call that the secure the bag mentality. This is something I've talked about on this channel. So many artists now, they don't view hip-hop as the end goal. Back in the day, you became a rapper because you wanted to rap. Somewhere along the line, that changed, and there was a schism, almost this fork in the road, where artists no longer cared so much about the music as opposed to getting money. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say that hip-hop became commercial in the 90s, I mean, even earlier in the 80s, but money really started to be pumped into the game in the mid to late 90s through the aughts, and there were a lot of people who were making a lot of money. Even someone like Jay-Z, who said, "I'm not a businessman, I'm a businessman." He's a great rapper. Yes, he's also a business person. His mind, because of who he is as a hustler and his backstory, his mind is always tuned into making money, into getting to the bag. But his foundation is as one of the greatest MCs of all time. It just so happens that he has an acumen for being a business person. That paradigm has shifted. Now, so many artists come into the game just seeing dollar signs. It doesn't matter if you're a great rapper. It doesn't matter if you even know how to rap or even have any sort of love or affinity for hip hop. This can be a way to make a lot of money in a very short amount of time. And now you have rappers who say, don't call me a rapper. Call me a brand, call me an artist, call me a rock star. The very phrase hip hop or rapper have become bad words. Back in the 90s, someone like a Jay-Z or Nas or Biggie, they were trying to compete with the people who came before them. Rakim, Kane, Cool G Rap, people like that who are actually great artists. Yes, they happen to be commercially successful, but the foundation was built on the fact that they were great MCs. Now all I hear is rappers bragging about, I don't write my rhymes. Before they even have a full album out, they're in a bidding war. They've got a ton of money on the table. Nowadays, hip hop is an entree into everything but music. You want to get into fashion, you want to get into movies, TV, you want to get into brand deals. Those are the things that excite people more than putting out a classic album. Or in this case, a classic song. Instead of the hyper commercialism, the music itself has suffered. There's so many reasons for that. I oftentimes point to Jay-Z specifically. When people found out that he didn't write his rhymes, everyone wanted to follow suit. Lil Wayne followed suit, and from that, you see a whole generation of artists who boast about not writing their rhymes. Newsflash, you need to write. At its heart, being a rapper is being a writer. It's being a poet. It's being a lyricist. Imagine Shakespeare bragging that he didn't write. Not everyone can be Jay-Z. Not everyone can be Biggie. These are outlier artists who didn't have to write down their rhymes. Most people need to write their rhymes, and there's nothing wrong with that. But that goes back to the craft, not loving the craft, not respecting the craft. Why do you care? I don't need to write. I'll just, whatever comes in my mind, that's what I'm gonna do. The New York Times ran a great video not too long ago about rappers punching in while they're in the booth. Punching in isn't something that's particularly new, but so many artists now rely on it. They can't recite a verse top to bottom. They can't do a Hot 16. They need every line, sometimes even every phrase to be punched in.
I think about
punching in like saying one bar at a time.
I got these resin can't fold in a wallet, you making the peasant. I got these resin can't fit in a wallet, I'm stacking a bigger deposit. Killa.
Definitely one line at a time.
Hit the store and don't leave in dead bodies. Hit the store and don't leave in dead bodies. Hit the mall and don't leave.
Yeah, that's pretty depressing, isn't it? Another aspect is technology. The magic in the studio of the artist and the producer working together, working collaboratively. It's rare. As much as we love T-Pain, I think auto-tune had a very detrimental effect on music across the board. Like, it's one thing to use it in maybe one song, but now every single person thinks that they need auto-tune. You have artists who don't write, artists who can't actually spit and they need to punch in every single line, and on top of that, you're adding auto-tune. There's a reason everyone sounds the same. Homogeneity is also attributed to the lack of regionalism. I've said this on this channel before. Before, there was so much pride in showing where you were from. An artist from New York sounded different than an artist from LA, who sounded different from an artist from Houston, Texas, who sounded different from an artist in Miami. It was all about showing where you were from, and the music, the way you dressed, the way you spit, the way you performed, that represented where you were from. It was about being unique. It was about being different. With social media, everybody looks the same. Everyone sounds the same. There's nothing special. And a lot of this criticism that I'm putting towards artists can also be put towards producers. We don't have producers anymore. We have beat makers. The things that made a producer special, having a signature sound, even having a signature drop that you knew that's a Timbaland beat, that's a Pharrell beat, that's a Dre beat. Those things seem to be gone with the new generation. With technology and everyone wants to work from home, artists and producers aren't even in the studio anymore. A lot of rappers now, they don't even go to the source. They'll go on YouTube or go on one of these sites where you can buy beats really cheap and look up Dr. Dre type beat or Kanye type beat. And essentially, they're buying a cheap knockoff. A lot of producers just send out their beats, and artists will decide which one they want to buy. They jump on it, and that's the record. So even from a production standpoint, where's the next generation of Alchemist or No ID or DJ Khalil, Bink, Just Blaze, like all of these people who are these incredible producers? So many of those producers write music, they can play instruments, they're doing so much more than just creating beats. They're working with the artists, vocal producing them, giving them ideas. I feel that that art is dying more and more every day. Okay, we've got the terrible artists and producers out of the way. Let's say you are a new artist and you do have quality music to put out there. The next factor that I think is affecting a lot of artists, especially new artists, is lack of artist development. This is something that we talk about all the time, and it's a very industry term, so I want to break it down for people who aren't in the industry. So what is artist development? Back in the day, when an artist signed to a record label, they usually signed a multi-album deal. That's why you see most of Jay-Z's discography went through Def Jam, for example. Yes, it was the imprint Rockefeller, but Def Jam was like the larger parent company. You saw this with Nas at Sony. Biggie was with Bad Boy, which was a part of Arista at the time. So you would sign a multi-album deal. Now, what does that mean? That means that in theory, the label is invested in you for multiple albums. Of course, it didn't always work out that way, but at least on paper, that was the synergy there. As the artist, I am committing to a relationship with you that's going to cover several years, several albums, and vice versa. As the label, you're investing in me in the long term. That doesn't happen anymore. Most rappers are signing 1-song deals, 2-song deals, maybe an EP deal. Let's use dating as the analogy. So back in the day, think of it as a long-term relationship. I like you like me, and we're going to be in this together. We're committed. Now it's basically a one-night stand. If it works, then maybe we'll keep talking. But if not, you know what? I didn't really invest a lot in you. I didn't really pay for a lot of dinners. I didn't tell you my life story. So I kind of don't care what happens. And if it doesn't go well, meaning that the artist doesn't perform up to the label standards, then we're good. Like, we don't need to talk anymore. We don't need to claim each other. We don't got to make it Instagram official. This was just a notch on the bedpost that we never have to speak of again. So just imagine when that's the mentality. As a label, I'm just not that invested in you as an artist. Even if a label is invested in artist development, the very definition of that has changed so drastically. Before, you would have an entire team that should be dedicated to you. Again, this did not always happen, but let's look at best case scenario. You would have an A&R whose job was to be there with you through the entirety of your music. Maybe that's finding the best producers to work with. Some of the best ones would be in the studio. I remember a story, someone like an Irv Gotti helping DMX rap on his first album. Like, yeah, say this line this way, or I need more energy here. Those were the things that helped DMX become a star. Before Murder Inc., Irv worked at Def Jam as an A&R, and he really wanted DMX to be signed there. He's the one who took Leor Cohen to that famous battle where DMX was rapping with his jaw wired shut, and he was so passionate and aggressive that the wires started breaking. Remember that? According to Irv, Def Jam didn't believe in DMX, but Irv was the one who was waving that flag. He was in the studio with him, helping him on songs like Get At Me Dog. DMX didn't like that record. Def Jam didn't understand that record, but Irv was the one who saw the vision. You know what? We should do this video in the tunnel. We got to keep it really gritty. He saw something in DMX, which would ultimately lead him to be a superstar. And that's what artists needed. Nowadays, labels are laying off everyone. If you happen to follow any of the headlines, all of the major labels have been laying people off left and right. They're in an era of consolidation where someone might be working at one label but expected to handle multiple labels' artists. The label really expects the artist and the artist management to come in and do a lot of that development on their own. We might give you money as an advance, but it's up to you to handle all of that development on your side. And that goes from the music to the imaging, choreography, the live show, the merch. It's really on the artist and their management team to do the heavy lifting, regardless of whether they're signed or not. anything, I think a major record label is there just to amplify what you're already doing. So if you're an artist, you've created your own buzz, you have your own sound, you have your own image, you know what you're doing, and you and your internal team are handling it. The label can give you additional money, and they can open certain doors that you can't open, especially when it comes to radio, television, a lot of those things that you just don't have the relationships. But that level of service is reserved for the 1% of artists. Most rappers are not going to get that. So that becomes a big conundrum. Whose job is it to develop new artists? The other thing that doesn't really get talked about enough is the lack of hip-hop executives within the major label system. The late 90s and aughts, we saw quite a few hip-hop executives, meaning that they were people who came from imprints, such as the Rockefellers, the Death Rows, the No Limits, going into the major label system, or they were DJs, producers, just hip-hop heads that were getting jobs within the label system. And that's something that I think artists need. If we want to see quality hip-hop being made and developed and promoted on a major label level, the people working in those buildings need to understand what quality hip-hop is. It can't just be signing the algorithm, signing what's already viral and trending. It's got to be people with an ear for hip-hop, a gut for what culture is, and a true love and appreciation where they want to make a positive contribution into hip-hop. But if those kind of people aren't being hired, they're not being promoted, or they're not being empowered to make those decisions, what are you going to get? Another thing that's missing is promotion. It just feels like records just come out on Friday and very few records are actually being promoted to us. Look at something like Sabrina Carpenter's Espresso. Whether you're a fan of her or not, you could not escape that song this summer. I heard that song everywhere. The radio, at the gym, I'm scrolling through my timeline and I don't follow her. I don't follow a bunch of pop stars, but I would see her album cover. I would see her at events. I'm seeing her getting awards. Clearly somebody's working this record. So I'm going to tell you a little secret. Hit songs don't just happen. Hit songs are made. Hit songs require entire teams of people to be working to make it happen. There's so many levers, and this is done largely on the major label side, working with promotions, which is radio, working with marketing, publicity, making sure that this artist is getting magazine covers and write-ups and being on television. Entire departments have to work together in cohesion to make sure that a hit record happens. And it's a combination, of course, of relationships, creativity, effort, as well as money. And I can tell you, just talking to so many artists who are signed to every single label across the board, they complain to me, I'm just not getting that promotional push. You look at something like Not Like Us. That song had the catalyst of being a part of one of the biggest beefs in hip-hop history. Then on top of that, you had that huge concert, which was co-signed by Amazon Music. And then you also have this video. These things don't just happen. There are teams behind the scene who had to help make it happen. That's the way hit records used to be broken back in the day. You'd have the video, you'd hear it on every radio station, you turn on the TV, the person is performing on SNL, you're flipping through a magazine, they got the cover of the magazine. All of these pieces had to be put into place to make these big hit records that we all know and love. How many artists are getting that kind of push nowadays? And on top of that, the media landscape has changed so drastically. There's not that many music magazines. Even if an artist wants to do a cover story or wants to be in a magazine, there's nowhere to go. And due to corporate consolidation, radio stations, especially regional radio, is becoming more and more of a dying breed. There's a reason the same songs you're hearing in New York, you hear in Atlanta, or you hear in Detroit, because so many stations are part of the same corporate umbrella. Oftentimes shows are syndicated. So again, this regionalism or things being distinct and having a chance to blow on a regional or local level become less and less. Culture is also not a monolith anymore. Growing up, regardless of what genre music you liked, we all shared certain cultural touch points. Everyone listened to the radio, everyone's reading Vibe magazine or The Source or Blaze. You come home and you're watching either TRL, 106 in Park, Rhapsody the Basement, or in my case, all of them. So we were all consuming a lot of the same culture at the same time. Now, you ask 5 different people what they think the hit song of the moment is, you're going to get 5 different answers. Some people still listen to terrestrial radio. Other people stopped listening to radio years ago and they just listen to their curated playlist. So that's going to be to them what they feel is a hot record. It's based on how you consume culture, where you consume it, what is the timeline that you follow. There's so many different platforms now that even the very idea of sort of a universal hit is harder and harder to have. Streaming has also changed the game. And on one hand, I love the fact that pretty much any song that's ever been made is at our fingertips. But the flip side of that is I think it's made it harder and harder for songs to push through and become hit records. You open up any streaming platform and it's literally overwhelming. So many new records drop, you have no idea what you should listen to first. So most of us just kind of go into our little safety blanket and listen to who we want to listen to. Don't give me everything else. I want to go straight to the artists who I already know and love. I don't have the time or energy for music discovery. And it's really sad on the streaming front because I do think that curation, and especially good curation, are so invaluable. A lot of you may not know, but I helped launch curation at SoundCloud. When SoundCloud launched playlisting for the first time, I oversaw the biggest hip hop playlist. And I'm going to tell you, it was a lot of work. The minute the clock hit midnight on Friday, my inbox was full of new music. Any given week, I was expected to listen to 75 to 100 new songs. Now, I listened to every single one because, again, I love music, and as a journalist, that's just something that spoke to me. But I'm not sure if every curator on every platform was doing that. I also took a lot of pride in my playlist. If a new song dropped, regardless of whether it was on a Friday or not, I would update my playlist in real time. I would listen to the playlist start to bottom to make sure that it flowed properly. Those things were really important to me. As time has gone on, you can see on the DSPs, they don't care about that. Most curators have been fired or laid off. Most playlists now are what we would call algorithmic playlists, so they just reflect what you already like listening to. So if you're a Drake fan, for example, you're going to get a lot of Drake records when you're listening to music, and that's not by accident. Many of these new music playlists are terrible. It's like a dump of 50 new songs, and you can tell based upon where the song is sitting on that playlist who pushed the bigger promotional button. Not always, but you know. Streaming also changed the way music is made. Because of the way the streams are counted, artists decided, I'm going to make shorter and shorter records, but I'm going to put more records on a release. That's why you might see, let's say, like an NBA Youngboy, where an album has like 20 songs. And I'm old school. Give me a strong 10 versus a mid 20. I'm all about quality over quantity. But I get it. As the artist, if I'm going to be incentivized to make shorter records and also to put out more content, regardless of whether it's good or bad, there's just no quality control anymore. On top of that is the way we consume music. How many people can honestly say you listen to an album start to finish in order? I still do because as a music journalist, that's kind of my job. But most people love to shuffle around or they zone in straight to the song that they like. So because of that, artists also aren't thinking about how does this flow within the album? What even is an album? I think a lot of new artists, the concept of an album seems foreign to them. Why would I put out a body of work? All I need is one record. Not even one record, all I need is a snippet. As a society, and I don't know if it's because of TikTok or social media, our attention span is getting shorter and shorter. So nowadays, fans don't even want to listen to a 2-minute song. That's too long. Give me the 10-second snippet that I see on TikTok. So how can you have a hit record when people will only listen to 10 seconds of your music? That means artists are focusing solely on the hook now or the first 10 to 15 seconds of an intro. That's not a song, that's a crumb. So yeah, I think those are just some reasons why we're not seeing as many hip hop hits as we would expect. Given how big the genre is, given how big the culture is, it just feels like it's lacking when it comes to actual hit records everyone knows, they're universally beloved. We're just in a very strange time. I think there's something to be said about hip hop also just becoming too successful. Stay with me on this one. Hip hop is everywhere and nowhere. And what I mean by that is it's the biggest cultural influence, not just in America. I mean, we see every celebrity, fashion designer, politician, everyone wants to tap into hip hop, but also overseas. Every country has their version of hip hop. You can see the way people talk, the way they dress, their philosophy on certain things. It's very clear that they're influenced by American hip hop artists. Sometimes when you become that big, you become all things to all people. I read this great quote. It's from a musicologist and historian named Zachary Diaz, and he was interviewed by Newsweek, and he said this: "There's been a musical gentrification of hip hop, which has seen corporations and big music labels try to profit from its popularity." That's true. This has led to a dilution of the sound that hip hop appears in all kinds of music, movies, and advertisements that has crossed over into other genres, so there is not even a clear idea of what hip hop is anymore. That's incredibly true. You look at the charts, so many artists are inspired by hip hop, whether it's Ariana Grande, Shabuzi, so many artists, whether it be in pop or country, reggaeton, K-pop, like they're all inspired by hip hop. What do you think is the future of hip hop? Do you think the genre has just gotten so big that now it almost needs to go back to its roots and its origin? Do you think this is just a cyclical phase that we're in, and right now pop and country are having their moment, but things always kind of turn back around when it comes to culture? I would love to know your thoughts. Let me know in the comments.